Hey guys, so the last empire we're going to be talking about for the ancient Near East is the Persian Empire. And these guys are important because they conquer basically all of the Middle East and unite it into a single cultural entity. So let's start with geography like we always do. So if you look over there on the map, in that circle there is kind of the Persian homeland. And so the first thing you'll notice when looking at the map is that Persia is in a rough mountainous region. And what this does is it prevents Persia from being incorporated into any of the earlier empires. It's hard to drive a chariot up into the mountains, right? So anyway, the Persians remain an independent culture for basically all of the ancient period. But they are really close to Mesopotamia, as you can see on the map there. And this means that even though they're never conquered by Mesopotamia, they're close enough to learn a lot of the important technologies and ideas that develop in Mesopotamia. So here's basically the quick story of Persia's rise to greatness. So Cyrus the Great is the most important leader of the Persian Empire. And he starts out by unifying Persia in 559 BC. After unifying Persia, he then heads to the west and conquers Babylon, Anatolia, parts of India in quick succession. One after the other, he just defeats them and incorporates them into the empire. But he dies in battle in 530 BC. His son takes over and immediately goes on to conquer Egypt. This guy dies pretty quickly, however, and then another guy named Darius takes over. And when this happens, widespread revolts break out. All of the conquered peoples are thinking, maybe with this new leader we can become independent again. But that's not the case. Darius successfully defeats all of the different rebels and forces them into the empire. And with Darius's victory, Persia now controls the largest empire that has ever existed in the ancient world. They control all of the areas we've talked about so far: the Levant, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Egypt, as well as parts of India. It's huge. So how does Persia maintain this vast empire? Remember, this is the big problem for all empires. Once you conquer and once you take stuff, step 3 is the most complicated, keeping it all together. And Persia does an excellent job of this. They have this huge empire, but they manage to keep it together, unified for 200 years. The first way that they do this is by a policy of tolerance. Rather than forcing everybody to follow the same religion, like Hammurabi did, the Persians decide to go the opposite direction. And they decide that they are going to allow a certain degree of religious freedom for the peoples that they conquer. So even though they believe in a certain thing, the other people can go on to worship whichever god it is they think listens to them. And this helps keep the empire unified because it prevents people from feeling oppressed by the Persian rulers. Another important thing they do is they set up a system where these guys called satraps rule the different parts of the empire. So, for example, there might be a satrap in Egypt, and a satrap in the Levant, and a satrap in Babylon. And these guys would kind of rule like a regional prince in that area. But they had to listen to the emperor back in Persia. And the emperor made sure to keep an eye on these guys and limited their power. This kept them from kind of doing whatever they want, and it also kept them from rebelling against him. And the main way that the emperor did this is that he would send loyal servants out from the capital in Persia to monitor the activities of these satraps. And because the satraps have to stay loyal, that means that the emperor retains control over the whole empire. Another important thing that the Persians do is they pay very special attention to the economy. They take steps to ensure that trade and stuff like that is prospering. That way everybody in their empire will be better off than they were before. And this helps everybody to accept Persian rule, because if things are better under the Persians than they were before, then you're less likely to rebel against them. So the first thing they do is they undertake a massive road building project, and they use funds from tribute from all over the empire to build roadways that connects all of the different regions together. This is important because it facilitates trade. Once the roads are built, it's much easier to transport goods and people from one place to another. And this turns this vast empire into a single unit. Another important thing they do is they develop one of the first systems of coinage. And how this works is they would produce official coins that were worth a certain amount that everybody agreed on. And this allowed for a transition from a barter economy, that is an economy where everybody just trades stuff, to a money economy where everybody uses a specific currency to exchange for goods. And this is important because it makes it much easier to trade. Imagine how difficult it would be to go to the grocery store if we didn't have money. What if we had to carry in a big wheelbarrow a whole bunch of other stuff to trade with people at the grocery store? And then we'd have to sit there and negotiate and argue about how many onions this shoe is worth, right? It would be a total mess. But because we have money that is official currency with an agreed upon value, it's very easy to buy and sell goods. And by making it easier to buy and sell stuff, there's more stuff for everybody, if that makes sense. But anyway, the point is that the Persians invent this system of coinage, and it helps everybody to be better off in the long run. Another interesting thing, and this doesn't really have to do with keeping the empire together, but it's another important legacy of the Persian Empire. And this is the Persian religion, which was Zoroastrianism. And so Zoroaster, the guy who founded this religion, lived in Persia in 600 BC. So that's before Persia became this huge empire, right? But anyway, Zoroaster kind of fought against the old superstitions of the Persians, right? He instead argued that the universe was one in which moral forces were at work. And he argued that the universe was actually locked in an eternal struggle between the forces of good and the forces of evil. And he taught that the leader of the forces of light was this eternal God named Ahura Mazda, who was the embodiment of light, truth, and wisdom. And on the other side, the god of darkness was Ahriman, who was the lord of darkness and lies and deceit and stuff like that. Not only did Zoroaster teach that this moral conflict was at the heart of all existence, but he also believed that human beings played an essential part in this conflict. He believed that human beings were in between the God of light and the God of darkness, and that we could either do evil or do good based on our own free choice. So we had the choice of either serving light or serving darkness. Of course, he believed it was better to serve light than darkness. Also, the Persian emperors believed in Zoroastrianism, and the emperor himself believed that he was the human leader of the forces of light. So as he conquered his empire, he believed he was fighting the god of darkness and spreading light and truth and justice and wisdom and order throughout the world. And maybe he was. So anyway, Zoroaster also believed that at the end of time, Ahura Mazda, the god of light, would triumph over the forces of darkness. And that when this happened, there would be a judgment day when all human beings would be judged based on their actions. And if the human beings had been servants of light, they would be sent to paradise. And on the other hand, if the human beings had been servants of darkness, they would be sent to eternal punishment. And This is important because this idea of a universe in which an evil force and a good force are competing with each other, and in which human beings are judged based on their loyalty to good or evil, goes on to influence later religions like Christianity and Islam. Just think about the idea of God and the devil in Christianity. It's really quite similar to this Zoroastrian concept. And when the Persian Empire conquers Israel, Zoroastrian ideas are introduced into that region, and they begin to influence Jewish and later Christian thought. Yeah, like I said. That's all for the Persian Empire. Make sure you take good notes. Not too many key terms, but they're important ones, so make sure you got them down. That is all.